Hey, so today we're going to cover a little bit more about our navigation and specifically how media queries work in CSS and what exactly they can do for our sites. So essentially, a media query is a way for us to responsively change our website view without having to adjust much of the markup. So they're very slick in that sense. So let's look at our problem. So right now we've got our navigation here. We styled it. We got the layout, and that looked great on desktop. But we never once checked to see what it would look like in different screen widths. So how do we do that? There's this cool little thing here. When we open up the dev tools, we've got toggle device toolbar. So that allows me to bring up specific device widths, and I can change that view here if I want to select like an iPad or an iPhone. I can just click one to show you. So here's what the iPad view would be like. I personally like to keep it in the responsive view and then just kind of know what range that I'm in. So by clicking these little, what they call breakpoints, we can see that. Now, look here, we're supposedly at, large, but things just aren't looking right, all right? Like the site's breaking, and you can see that everything's busted out of that navigation because we've only got it set with a 2-column layout. So how do we fix that? So the first thing I like to do is like, all right, where does it look like it's breaking? Like these don't look good. We'll address that in a little bit. First of all, when we go to like our tablet, that's typically when you start to see the little, what they call the hamburger menu, or the three dashes for to click a menu, right? That's when that usually appears, because as you can see right here, we're kind of cramped. And we can make this look good, but what happens when we have more menu items? So that's typically why we drop to that small little navigation menu icon for navigations. For this video, we won't do that. I just want to get into media queries in general. So what's the first thing we do? Well, we need to write a media query to break this into a single column and have multiple rows. So we're going to float this menu below our logo. So how do we do that? So right here, we've got our grid and our columns this way. It would be nice to kind of get it to go like that, right? So we've got 2 rows. So how can we do this? So first thing we do, we're going to start here, and this looks a little weird to start with. So we have @media, okay? And then we tell it right here, well, what width do we want? What are our dimensions? But just like we have a min width and a max width with our CSS, we also have that with our media queries. So we can say when we hit a minimum width of, we'll say 768 pixels, and I'm not just making this number up. That's typically, if we look here, tablet, that's the tablet size. So when we're on an iPad, right, that's the view that we'll get. So I like to start there. What's it going to look like above tablet? Okay, so this might be a little bit to kind of grasp when we're starting out, but we basically say once we hit this minimum width, once we hit 768 pixels, I want you to apply these styles. But what are we going to apply it to? So we need to apply it to our class, right? Or whatever we're selecting. So this gets a little bit more interesting. So we're telling it what width it's going to be, but then we're selecting very specifically what's our selector. In this case, we're going to have our class. So to see how this works, why don't we just simply change the background color here so you can understand what is happening. Why don't we just set this to be black? So it's nice and dark, and we can see, all right, it's changed. Now that's because we're exactly at 768. What happens if I go to 767? Oh, okay, interesting. So it's gone. So do you see what I mean when I say minimum width? Once we hit this minimum width, whatever that is, apply these styles. So why that's so amazing is because it doesn't matter what necessarily our device is. This is like our screen width, right? So anything above, once I hit desktop, it'll apply that. So now you can maybe start to see how this can apply. If we can do that with simply a background color, we could probably also do that with how many columns do we want to supply. So I know we can get really crazy with media queries. I would just like to show you that it doesn't have to be crazy. In fact, if you keep things nice and simple like this, sometimes it's even easier to understand and work with live code bases that way, and gradually apply the complexity that you need. So we'll start here. So once I hit this, then go ahead and apply these styles. But since this isn't an immediate query, this would be what we call our very base, or the lowest mobile friendly view that we can get, right? Because it's going to apply all the way across the board, even above this. But once we hit this class, remember our cascade, it's going to override whatever we have in here. Okay, so we could do this, just set our columns to one column, one FR. And as we start to shrink down and we get below that tablet view right there, it hit. Okay, so here's our tablet. Right when I go below tablet, now we're at one column. Above tablet, now it adds those styles. See how that works? Okay, so now this still is broken, right? I'm supposedly at our mobile, but you can see we've got all this extra space and these things don't look good. So now we need to go write another media query for our navigation here. So let's go take a look at that. So our navigation's got that display flex. Now sometimes, again, I'm trying to approach this like we don't know anything, right? That's how all these videos are trying to be. So if we don't know anything, how would we start to debug this? And one thing I like to do is start as far down as you can go. So drill all the way down to, okay, this is the deepest child element, and then work your way up. Is there anything in here that I could take off that starts to change things? Well, yeah, but that just ruined all my styles. That really had nothing to do with the layout. Okay, so our layout's still kind of broken. As you can see, I kind of click and toggle this on and off. Sometimes as you change things, it might seem like it's fixed, but it's really not. Would that do anything? Yeah, but not really what we're wanting. Okay, what happens if I uncheck some of these? Okay, yeah, that changes stuff. Oh, okay, so there's a big one. So see kind of how I did that? So that'll help you kind of identify, okay, well here's the main thing that's causing that. So what can I do to fix this? Well, fortunately with Flexbox, we have the availability to change that direction. So instead of it just being more of kind of in line or in a row, we can change that to column. So we have something called flex direction. And you can see right here our options or our values. So we'll select column. Okay, so that's pretty nifty. Now, we have some other things happening here. I know this because we wrote this, but so our justify self, right? We might only want that to apply when we are above our tablet view. And then it looks like we've also got that margin here. So that's where all these are coming in. So you see how you just kind of have to uncheck things, see what's happening where, and then at what breakpoint do we want that to all go back to normal. So let's go ahead and do that. So we made a few changes. So let's start with this one. So we've got our navigation list. So let's go down to that. We can just copy this just for simplicity here. We need to put this in here. And then what we want to do is there's a little deception going on here. So we want the flex direction when we are at mobile, right? But we're actually going to change the flex direction back to a row once we hit this breakpoint. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Let's see that happen. Okay, so when I come up here, yes, the direction's changed. When I drop below tablet, now that. And so how did we do that? Well, we knew we had something happening here. So let's do something maybe a little different for this one. So here we know that what we can actually do, we don't want anything here for mobile. we just want it to be nothing. But as soon as we hit our tablet, then go ahead and align it to the end. Okay, so as we come up, now align it to the end. If we go down, don't apply anything. In fact, just leave that completely empty. Okay, so now we've got the margin here. How would we do that? This one might be a little trickier because we're saying not the last child. So again, start with our media query. We just want to say when we are above our tablet view, go ahead and apply this. So maybe we could just copy that whole thing into here. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Does that apply? Yep. Okay, so again, the very basics of using media queries, and you can see how we can kind of alter each different breakpoint for what we want to do. I think that covers it for this lesson. We can go a lot more crazy and a lot more modifications, but that's just the simple gist of how you can start to use them. So play around with it. Again, it looks a little weird at first. It's not something that you typically see in CSS when you're a beginner, but you will see a lot of them, I guess, on other sites. But I think initially, as you start to write CSS, I guess that isn't something that you necessarily come across. So I hope that was helpful. Again, we'll dive a little bit more into it and kind of maybe optimize this and figure out what kind of layout we want. So I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks.